All right. Welcome everybody at 6:05 p.m. on May 11th, 2026 for tonight's meeting of the Whately Housing Committee. Meeting is called to order. First order of business is to approve the minutes of our April 6th meeting, which were circulated to everyone by Montserrat. Actually, she circulated again on the 6th. I reviewed it, looks good to me. So floor is open for any comments or corrections to Montserrat. Otherwise, somebody could make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of
Second.
April 6th meeting.
Motion has been made. Do I hear, who is that? Montserrat, you can second that.
Yes, I did.
All right, you can second it. All right. So we have to do roll call. So Melissa.
Here, yes.
Yes, you vote. Yeah, yes to approve the minutes.
Oh, yes, yes, sorry.
Yes to approve the minutes, right?
Yes.
Aye. Fred Orlowski,
Yes.
Montserrat,
Yes.
Grant is yes. So that's it. All right, so the minutes are approved. So we move on to our main item of business, which is discussing the plan for the engineering assessment of the DeMayo property at 268 State Road. I'm delighted that Chris Chamberlain is here with us tonight. I don't have a highly structured, basically, Chris, I want to just give us some time so we can maybe, if you want to give us a sense of what the current sense of the schedule is and timing, and this is just a great time to ask and answer any questions that you may have of us or we may have of you about how this project will unfold in time and how we can help make it successful.
Sure. And so
maybe you should introduce yourself because
Great.
I know you from planning board. But
Perfect. Yeah, Chris Chamberlain. I'm a principal civil engineer at Berkshire Design Group in Northampton. Have worked on several projects in Whately, both for some private developers and with the Water District, and a couple of other folks in the office were involved in the Exit 35 study and other odds and ends. And so Jerry had reached out to, I'm looking at my proposal from late January with sort of high level. My understanding is there was a solid study done of this property a few years ago, but potentially, sort of seemed to be lacking some actual physical on the ground assessment of a couple of key factors that are going to go into any potential development that goes into this project. And then also, at least, and I don't know if this was reflective of the whole committee, but Jerry expressed some concern about some of the limitations of the unit layouts and things like that were considered in that original study. So we are here to get a little bit more granular, real physical information on the site. And then potentially update some of the old concepts, new concepts, or we, based on our findings on some of the possibilities with septic and wetlands, we may be able to find more or less development potential in the site. So at this point, I think we've got all the paperwork squared away. I have Wordsmith, Wendell Wetlands Service, planning to go flag the wetlands about 2 weeks from now.
okay.
We're anticipating finding perennial stream in the back, the mean annual high water, which marks the edge of the riverfront zone. That riverfront zone is a protected area under the Conservation Commission, of course, and I'm expecting that's going to extend quite a ways into the site, which is not the end of the world because since this site was previously developed, there's going to be some ability to redevelop those areas inside the riverfront. And we also have a little bit of information on the old septic system that's on site, although it's pretty sketchy. I have Alan Weiss, Cold Spring Environmental, who's worked a ton in Whately, to do some additional perk testing so that we can look at traditional and alternative systems and what kinds of layouts may be feasible, and just generally what the site's going to be able to support from a real septic design. We won't go so far as to design it, but having that perk test information will allow us to size a realistic system and at least come up, with conceptual ideas of what a layout might look like without necessarily detailing the entire system. And once we get the wetlands done, and either before or after the perk testing, we'll also get our surveyors on site to get a complete topographic survey of the property from the stream to the road. And anything beyond that is not really going to be relevant for potential housing development. And we're going to pull together resource areas. I mentioned the riverfront. We also know there's floodplain on site. So we're going to make sure we've got the flood elevation established. And so we're not just working off of the FEMA maps, but actually have a real idea of what floodplain impacts there potentially are. Find out if there are any surprise wetlands, which as a housing developer, you find sometimes. And then that is looking like we're tentatively scheduled for just after Memorial Day to do field work for survey. We're penciled in on May 26th, but that's not a hard date. We can move that around a little bit. And then 2 or 3 weeks after that, we should have a final survey plan. And then at that point, we can start looking at some of that conceptual design work, especially for the wetland resource areas and the septic. And then lastly, we'll be putting together sort of a new iteration of potential conceptual site layouts and give you some assessment of what we think realistically you're going to be able to get out of this property for unit counts. And likely we're going to come up with a few different modes of development that either comply with zoning as is, or potentially, could be unlocked with some changes, and give you some assessment of what that is. And then we'll be happy to meet with you one or more times through that process to make sure that we're marching in the right direction. So if based on all of that, survey plan will probably be ready in mid-June. And then we can really jump right into some of that layout stuff, which that can go pretty rapidly. That's really weeks, not months, to develop some of those things. And then probably have a little bit of back and forth and dialogue and get some comments before wrapping that all up into a document that you can have in hand. So that's where I see us going, but I'm happy to address any questions or specific things that we want to have in mind as we're setting out on this, or anything else that's on people's minds.
Great. So Montserrat. So I was sort of now going through this step by step, so that was great. Thank you, Chris, for that overview. So I remember Montserrat, because we had a discussion by email about the wetlands delineation, and I think you said that Scott was, willing and able to help.
Yes, when I don't. Do you have his exact wording? I can look it up if you don't have it with you.
I don't have it exact wording.
Well, back when before this latest plan, when we were looking at the old concept of what could be on there, I looked at that plan with Scott Jackson, the chair of the Conservation Commission, and I'm a conservation commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw a number of issues with the wetlands delineation and things that he felt were not accurate. So it's important to get that right. And I did let him know that we were going to go ahead with this plan, and he offered to meet with us, look at plans, help in any way. He was very generous with his time.
Great.
In fact, I have now the quote.
Okay.
Montserrat. Scott said, "I'm happy to help in any way I can. Please let the folks at BDG know they can contact me anytime with questions or updates. I'd also be willing to meet with them on site if they would find that helpful. I'm also willing to meet with the housing committee as needed." Great. So you've now officially been notified, Chris. And if I can
Chris,
facilitate that.
with Scott before?
Yes, yes. I've had projects in front of the commission. I knew I recognized your name from somewhere. And yes, I've have met on site with Scott more than once on projects, and he's great with his ability to actually engage with specific questions on
Right.
theoretical
He's
sites.
more
So,
knowledgeable than anyone about these issues.
well, he wrote a lot of it. So,
Yeah. Oh, and also, I
um,
just want to say while I have the floor,
Yeah.
I'm not moving and my computer is not moving, but for some reason, Zoom keeps readjusting my picture. I swear
Oh,
I'm not doing anything.
you're looking very stable to me,
I
Monse.
So if
haven't
it's
noticed it,
distracting, I
yeah.
apologize.
Yeah, so I think what the way we'll handle that is, and I know that Scott has a very long relationship with Ward Smith, who's going to do our delineation, and Ward is on the conservative end, meaning that he's pretty careful about identifying potential wetlands wherever they might be, as compared to others who are maybe a little less strict about finding all of them. And I think Scott has a lot of confidence in him. But we'll get that delineation done, and then yeah, I think it'll be great to once we have the survey in hand to review that with Scott and see, get his feel for whether he thinks the limits are accurate or whether we need to double check a few things, and then what a path forward may be in terms of permitting. I think we're going to pretty clearly be under a riverfront redevelopment for anything in the riverfront area, which gives us opportunity, but also definitely creates some limits as to what's going to be possible there.
Okay.
And
Okay.
going over that survey with Scott, is that something that
Yes.
that you can arrange, or do you need me to facilitate that?
Oh, Chris went dark.
Chris seems to have frozen.
He went black. It's all black.
All right. Yeah. Every once in a while that happens. Usually I've been lucky lately that it hasn't happened in a meeting, but you folks are the winners.
Okay. No problem. So did you hear Montserrat's question?
I
Maybe
I
not. Try again,
started
Montserrat.
saying some things and now I wonder where I cut off.
We didn't hear any of the things you said.
Oh no. Okay. Great. So yeah, I think once we have the delineation done and have
Oh
the
yes,
survey
we
in
heard
hand.
that part.
Yeah,
We
okay,
heard
great.
that part. And then I asked if you have a survey and that's the time to go over it with Scott, is that something that you can reach out to him directly about? Or
Absolutely,
would you like me to
yes.
facilitate that?
No, I was actually emailing with him late last week about a different site on a project we're working on.
All right.
Okay, perfect, perfect. So if I heard right, Chris, you're thinking that maybe it's like, call it middle of May now, or like the end of May, you'll do the wetlands delineation. And it, from a scheduling standpoint.
Yes.
And it's like is that like a 1 day, swoop in, or is it a multi-day? Like how long does it take to do that?
That should be done in a single day.
Okay, so single day. And just maybe my audio here is, were you identifying somebody named Wordsmith, or was it Ward Smith?
Ward Smith, W-A-R-D.
Okay, so Ward Smith is the delineator of choice here. Okay, so that's a single day, end of May. All right, very good. And then, so that sounds good. I think we're good on that part of the project. And then the soil evaluation and perk testing, you thought did I hear that was after Memorial Day, or was that already the topographic survey?
So the survey, again, on-site field work is tentatively May 26th. That should be a single day. It's possible we'll have to go back for a second day depending on how much they get done the first day out there.
Okay, so the field work is the soil evaluation and perk testing.
No, actually, that's for topographic survey. So that's the survey work. That'll be the soil evaluation and perk testing is independent of all of those. That can happen first, second, third among those.
Okay.
Among
What
the
I seem to remember, and apologize, a lot was, Jerry was really carrying this ball and then he had to like step off the committee.
Sure.
So there may be little things, little balls or pieces of information that got dropped or muddled in the transfer. But I seem to recall that for the soil evaluation, perk testing, there is this need for a backhoe.
Yes.
I seem to recall, and maybe others on this committee can confirm, that Jerry had talked, and I don't know whether he ran this by you, Chris, that our highway department has such a piece of equipment that they would make available to, you, presumably with some coordination around scheduling and that sort of thing. Does that ring a bell?
That sounds right. And hopefully they mean not just the equipment, but the equipment and an operator, because I don't drive a backhoe.
Yes.
Right.
Right. So,
but yes,
I can clear that with Garrett and
Great.
try to coordinate that.
okay. All
Perfect.
right. So you're gonna
Garrett Barry's our highway superintendent.
Sure.
right. So I keep wanting to call you Susan now. So Fred, you're gonna be the
Yeah, I will contact Garrett and let him know that this request is coming,
okay.
and then you can coordinate timing with him.
Okay.
Great.
So for the record, so you, Fred, will email, and including the housing committee email, so I'm in the loop. So you'll communicate with Garrett, including Chris. Do you have Chris's email, Fred?
If I don't have it on a previous email, which I think I do,
Okay.
I can get it easily enough.
Perfect. So you'll broker that connection between our highway department and Berkshire Design for access to a backhoe and an operator when needed. And then the Foothills Health District Observer. That's, I guess, something Berkshire that Chris, you guys coordinate?
Yes, we will coordinate with that. Alan Weiss, who's going to be doing our perk testing, does a lot of work in Whately, so he knows the people over there.
Okay.
I tried to get someone to say that the fee for the witness of the perk test could be waived, but nobody seemed to be able to make that happen. So we'll have to pay the fee, which is then going to turn around and come straight back to the town, but so be it.
Okay. All right. I think, yeah, we understood that was the way that was going to end up working.
Chris, what for the backhoe excavator, whatever,
Yes.
what do you figure the timing will be? When roughly do you think that might be needed?
So we'll probably be looking end of May, first week of June, most likely.
I just want to give Garrett a heads up of when it might be.
Yeah, something like that. And then, but ultimately the date will be between when is good for him to give us a backhoe and when the health inspector can be out there, along with our guy.
Okay.
And Fred,
I love those multi-way schedule coordination tasks.
just for the minutes, what is Garrett's last name? Do you know?
Barry, Barry.
Thank you.
All right. Highway. All right. Any other questions I've just been moving through this. Everyone else good with so far? So we are looking step one is coming up in a couple of weeks on wetlands, the perk testing end of May, early June, and then the topographic survey. It was clearly understood, Chris, just reconfirming, I know it's in the contract, that we did want the full survey option, not the limited survey.
Correct.
Option.
Yes, I have that.
Okay. And of course, in the final, the final deliverable or deliverables, we will, get like maps that show the wetlands delineation and appropriate reports of the soil evaluation and all of it.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the one thing that I want to highlight that I know was understood by Jerry, but as I was reading through this, it could be, I imagine we stuck it in toward the end, that this does not include a boundary survey.
Yeah.
Which that can be a whole deal. So I imagine the GIS lines that we're going to use are close. They won't be, enough to count as a survey, but in terms of feasibility, perfectly valid to figure out how many units we have based on those setbacks.
Right. I mean, I think we're really interested in understanding the extent of the buildable portion of the
Yeah.
property. I know Fred Orlowski, you were very, very, getting us, so it's clear we're not paying for getting, a property line survey. So I just want to touch base with you, Fred, to see like, are you okay, or is there an argument that we somehow need to get a true survey, or can we live without it at this point? What's your point of view?
No, I think, well, depends how you define a full survey is all property boundaries, locating the corners and distances. I think in this case, it's my main objective was to locate the boundaries of the state highway system, because that is not very clear on GIS maps where that is. And you
Right.
can't really look at a GIS map to see boundaries of highways anywhere in town. You have to actually find the markers on the
Yeah.
side of the road to do that. And that's more critical, I guess, for the boundaries for the state highway to do that.
Great. And to clarify, so we are going to survey any monuments that we can find. So we're going to look for the monuments and include those in the survey. What we're not going to do is the deed research in order to be able to provide certified property lines. But as long as the monumentation of the highway layout is findable out there, we will have those.
Right, because the difference it may make is in the size of the parcel. I,
Yeah.
I mean, how many square feet or acres is a parcel? So you need to know that, at
Right.
least for the highway side, the boundary markers, which are different than what's the clear opening on the parcel. The boundaries
Right.
go actually beyond that. It's, if you go there, you can see some of that already. So
Okay.
yeah.
I will make sure to highlight that for them when they go out there.
Awesome. Okay. All right. And so you're thinking that the site survey work was, again, like more like sometime in after Memorial Day or around the 26th of May.
That's right.
Presumably, these things are subject to weather. You probably not going to do it in a
Correct.
torrential downpour or anything like that. But so maybe by early June, the topographic survey is done. And the topographic survey is also like a one-day thing or a multi-day thing, or
I think it's just one day of field work. It's possible we'll be there for a second day, or at least a partial second day. I
okay.
can't remember what was assumed. Um, yeah, and so then that's the field work last week of May, and then it'll be 2 to 3 weeks after that we'll have the plan created.
Okay. And the plan is what because is that's not, then there's these other steps, the feasibility review and the conceptual
Right.
studies.
Sorry to clarify, the survey
Yeah.
plan. So the
Okay.
existing condition, basically the
Okay.
plan of all the existing conditions.
Okay. All right. So then I guess then I'm hearing that maybe by, so existing conditions by like the end of June is maybe
It
what
should
I'm
be
hearing.
middle of June
Okay.
is what
So
we're looking for.
conditions by middle of June. And then, you put on your big thinking caps and are working on the feasibility review and the site layouts.
Exactly, yeah. So I would say that it would probably be useful to look at something in the first part of July to have a check-in
Okay.
of what we have there. By then, we'll be able to do some conceptual sizing on septic, and we'll have had a chance to look at where the wetland resource areas are falling, floodplain, things like that, and at least have sort of done the initial head scratching process of what's possible. And I think that so that'll be a good time to make sure that we then take that in a direction with our conceptual layouts that's going to meet what you folks are thinking.
Okay, great. Because I'm just looking at my calendar. It looks like we typically meet on the second Monday of a month. So June would be the 8th, July would be the 13th. So, yeah, that sounds likely given that yeah. So I'm thinking just for people to start to imagine this, that a check-in on this could be happening for our meeting on Monday, July 13th. That's 6. And then, continuing the pattern, our August meeting, so I'm just, what's going on with me? Okay. So I know that on the 10th, when we would normally meet, I'm going to be, so we might either have to meet on August 3rd or August 17th, just for your benefit, Chris, sort of think like, so if we were doing something in, as I said, around July, what did I say? Like July 13, then when do you think would the August meeting be roughly the final delivery or
Yeah, let's say
September?
draft final, because I imagine that there'll be some comments
Okay.
on some of those layouts. But yeah, I think that should be reasonable.
Okay.
If we have our existing conditions in the middle of June and we have a check-in where we've developed some idea of where we're going with this in July, then by August, yeah, that'll be a good amount of
Okay.
time to have something that we think is just about complete.
Okay. So that might actually argue for like if works for everyone, like an early August, like an August 3rd sort of meeting, to look at a pre-final. That would only give you, if we met on July 13, that would only give you 2 more weeks if we met on August 3rd. So we could just instead do something more like August 17th.
Yeah, I think 3 weeks, but yeah, so that's probably the minimum that we'd want.
Okay.
So I think if it's all the same to everybody, the 17th seems
Yeah.
safer to have a
All
really
right.
good plan at
All
that
right.
point.
We'll review all of these dates as we wrap up the meeting. Right now, I'm
Yeah.
just sort of doing a rough order of calendar math to see how this all plays out.
Mhm.
So then, and then we get into September, and then our regular schedule would be Monday, the 14th, which would currently works for me. Yeah. So that could be like roughly final delivery mid-September.
Yeah, and I imagine we'd transmit something to you sooner than that, but
Of
sort of
course,
to
of
officially
course.
accept it.
Okay. All right. All right. That sounds workable to me. And I did, since you made this comment about compliance or non-compliance with zoning, I mean, I think when we thought about this site, there's the understanding that we have this, community housing bylaw, but it was designed around this idea of, relatively small numbers of units, because the thought was, well, this is what people in Whately would most likely accept. But in this committee, I think that when it comes to something like at 268 State Road, we've had, or maybe I'll just speak for myself, there's been this working assumption that if this work that you're doing suggests that something, a housing project of economically feasible scale could be done there, which we've been hearing is like 30 units or more, then, I mean, that's kind of what we want to know. Is this, with all the constraints and all of that, can a really, given the way the developer market goes, like, could we really put something there? And then we would try to do it as like a friendly 40B, assuming that even something of that scale, that we did enough of the legwork with our neighbors in town to make sure that there wouldn't be huge opposition to an economically feasible scale housing project there. But I think if there were an economically feasible project there, then it would only be if we could do it as a friendly 40B.
Sure. Yeah. And so that's helpful context. And I think that jibes with the way that Jerry had described things earlier. And what I would summarize as certainly one or more of the options that we may end up coming up with is the largest technically feasible development that might fit on this site. And that may or may not reach the number of units that then becomes economically feasible.
Yeah, that's what we need to know. Fred.
Yeah, I think that the key that we got to remember here, and one of the reasons for doing this kind of study, is not only economically feasible, environmentally feasible, because that's the key. If looking through all the wetland delineations and proposed septic system that could be there, what that's going to control, I think, the number of units there, not the economics. The economics is somebody wants, well, the minimum is 20. Well, environmentally, if it can't support 20, that's a mute point, I guess, to look at it that way.
Yeah.
So I think you got to keep that in mind.
That's exactly right. And we're using different words to describe the same thing. When I said technically feasible, that's exactly what I mean.
Right.
Yeah.
And economically feasible is in the mind of a developer.
Right.
That's right.
Right. But I think,
And we're
again,
hoping those
speaking
two things will come together.
Right.
Yeah. Hopefully that will come together. It's like we keep trying to do something with the center school up in Whately, and we can never seem to get anything going there. Maybe because, well, anyway.
Yes.
Okay. I'm very happy. That sounds great to me. Comments, questions from anybody else?
No, Chris, it sounds like we've communicated what we want and you're on board with the information that we're looking to find.
Great.
Okay.
Well, then, we're looking forward to going out and gathering it and putting it together in a way that you can understand.
So I would ask
I think Fred's
got a question.
Go ahead, Fred Orlowski.
One, I guess maybe it's kind of a side note here to be aware, maybe for Chris. I've noticed, I go by that site maybe once a week, whatever, weekends to do, mostly. There's activity going on at that site. People stop, do something, whatever they want there.
Okay.
I don't know if that's just for your information. You may run into people, other people besides your company that are there. I don't know if it's worth doing anything with the town to say it's private property, put up a sign or something. I know Snowmobile had access, Snowmobile Club had the rights to use it for parking and all, but now there is other activity going on there, not every day, but sporadically. So,
I go by there almost every day, and it's a cop stop there to eat lunch, or Verizon trucks, or but I think if you're working there, they won't do it that day.
Sure.
Right.
Okay, that's good to know. I mean, certainly, the surveyors go out in a team with a bunch of equipment. I don't think they're going to be troubled by it. And certainly, if there's a backhoe there, I think that's going to discourage anybody from stopping by.
And I think in June,
I'll
you're not
definitely
going to
mention
run
it.
Interference from the Snowmobile Club.
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't need your guys, Chris, don't need any kind of like formal letter or documentation from us, right? I mean, you have a signed contract. Basically, you could waive.
That's right. We are ready to go. And as long as we don't have any restrictions on access to the site, we're going to get out there as soon as we can.
I can also let the police chief know, as soon as you have a date, let the police chief know that you'll be working there.
Sure.
That'd be great. And if, since Chris, that this committee meets, early, the first or second-ish Monday of every month, if by roughly the beginning of each month, you could shoot me a short to the housing committee, if you could just shoot me a short email update of, even if nothing has happened yet, just then I have that to share.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a bunch of our field work should be done by your June meeting. We'll probably have the survey plan almost ready, so I'll make a note to have an update for you then.
Great. Okay. All righty. Well, if there are no other questions for Chris, I think we can let him move on to.
And Chris, I checked. I've got your email, so
great.
I will pass that along to the highway department.
Perfect.
All right. Well, then I'll thank you in advance for the great work you're going to do for us. This is really going to help us figure out whether we have a hope of, well, what we can hope for on that site.
Very good.
Yep.
All right. We'll keep you up to date and we'll get to it.
All right.
Thanks
Sounds
so much.
good. Have a great night, Chris.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. So, we are now ready to move on, which is, we're almost done basically. Okay, cool. Topics not reasonably, well, this was sort of, you might say reasonably not. Anyway, so we have a vacancy on the housing on this committee because Jerry has stepped off the committee. So I don't think we need to have a discussion right now, but if any of you think of anyone or want to make any other recommendations of people like I might reach out to and ask, it would be good to, have full strength on the housing committee. I don't think I don't feel we need to have this discussion live here now. And then we also have a parallel opening on the housing trust. And I've suggested to Melissa that she fill Jerry's now vacated seat there. So apparently, if you're open to that idea, I said very easy, low burdensome thing.
Sure.
Melissa,
Yeah.
What apparently you can do, if you go to the Whately town website, under boards and committees, and then under housing trust, there's a list of house trust members, and there is right at the top, there's a place where it says, resident vacant 2-year term, and there's a link that says apply here. I don't know what the application looks like. I'm hoping it's pretty lightweight. And then it'll be the usual select board discussion vote and then an appointment.
All right, I'll look for that.
Okay. That'd be great. And then we'll, as I said, because our next meeting. So any other topics that nobody anticipated, just didn't see coming? Okay. All right. So meetings and calendar scheduling again. So back to, June 15 is the second Tuesday of June. It would be the quarterly meeting of the Housing Trust. So the Housing Trust would meet up front at 6:00 p.m. And then
what day?
That is Monday, June 15. Massachusetts estimated taxes are due that date, just FYI. So check your calendars and confirm that Monday, June 15 is good, and we would do it as a housing trust meeting at 6, and then 6:15, the housing committee would meet. And I don't know, what we may, at this point, I think the housing committee, until and unless we decide collectively there are other things we want to work on while this engineering study is going on, we might just have a very short meeting in June.
I'm confused. I thought you had said that the Housing Trust meets right before this committee.
Yes, so
And
the
I thought-
Housing Trust meets quarterly. And then, because when the Housing Trust meets, it's a very short meeting. We usually set it so that it meets at 6 and it's done by, say, 6:10.
Yeah.
And then we schedule the housing committee meeting to immediately follow at, say,
All right.
6:10.
I guess my confusion is, why is it June 15th when I thought you said this meeting was June 8th, which is the second Monday?
Well, the reason I said that, thank you for asking, indeed, June 8th is the second Monday, but for some reason, I'm seeing on my calendar June 15. Did we discuss
because we
this?
rescheduled it. Someone had a conflict.
I had a conflict that night.
So it is
So
June
it was going to
15th.
be on the 8th, and we moved it to the 15th.
Okay, I just was confused.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
it makes sense that you were confused.
Okay, all right, we broke the
On
pattern.
my calendar, I can see that one was rescheduled.
Okay, very good. So then we just agreed that June 13, Monday, June 13.
July.
I'm sorry, July. Thank you, Melissa. Thank you. I'm going to put this in my calendar while I'm talking about it, thinking about it. So we just said Monday, July 13. And that sounds like a check-in with Berkshire Design. And then in August, we said Monday, August 17th, again, breaking the pattern to give them a little extra time. We said 6 o'clock on Monday, the 17th of August.
And that's fine. Most years we don't even have a meeting in August, so.
Yeah. So we might, yeah.
We probably should if we've got this report
we can cancel
expected.
it later if we want to.
It's only 10.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that, Montserrat?
I said, why don't we schedule it for the 17th? And if we decide that we don't need it, we can cancel it later.
Right.
Right. Okay. And then we said September would be on the 14th, following the regular rule.
I will be away most of September,
Okay.
so I won't make
That's
that
okay.
meeting.
Okay. It should still be fine because you'll have participated in the August meeting, which will get an early look at their overall work and have input into it. And that seems like, and I think so if we're doing housing trust in June, then housing trust is also September. But even with Melissa being absent, we would still have a quorum.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just put in a note in my calendar for housing trust meeting on Monday, September 14th. Okay. Excellent. All right. I think that's everything. So we're scheduled through September. Good. Okay.
Before we adjourn,
Yes.
excuse me. Oh, Fred, go ahead.
Could you just remind us, is there warrant articles on the June town meeting for the housing trust or housing committee, or CPA money going into the trust? Is there warrant articles for any of that? Do you remember?
So not to my knowledge, nor have we made a request. And it's an interesting question, Fred. Should we? I've had the impression that the housing trust should only be requesting monies from the CPC, the Community Preservation Committee, kind of if we have need. Like, we shouldn't just keep building up our war chest.
And that's reciprocated by the CPC, that they don't want to keep just funneling money into the CPC, into the housing trust, without a specific project.
But then you got to remember the schedule that the CPC has for using their money, using the money, whether you use it for a project or putting it into the trust. I mean, it's like what, June or July and December or something like that.
Right.
There are times, so I guess we need to maybe be aware of that in the future if we need more money to do it 6 months ahead of time, not wait till the month before.
Yeah, it's a good point. And
We should
maybe
be ready to make a request. I think they have a December deadline.
December, yeah.
So if we need more money, we need to be ready to request something by then.
Well, I think that's perfect, because by September we'll know whether we're giving up on the DeMeo property or not.
And my guess is if we make a specific request of CPC for a project, that their schedule may be adjusted for a specific allocation.
Yeah. And if we're able to go in and say, we did this study, which, oh, by the way, your funds funded, these were the results. And of course, we're obliged to provide reports now every 6 months to the CPC when we use their funds. So we'll have to share everything from this study with the CPC. And then that means there's more work to be done that needs to be funded and can be funded, then that's a great lead into a request in December.
Yeah, and I think CPC's within their rights. If they allocate money to us, they lose control of it. It's not coming back to them. If they've got a major project like something involving the center school, that money would no longer be available to them. To fund that.
Okay. Melissa.
I was just hoping that you could take a few minutes. I know you kind of gave me a background last month, but now that I've dug more into it, I feel like I have to do a little bit of catching up.
Okay.
One of my questions was, I was reading, I don't remember which of you sent it to me. What was the role of all that VHB? Was that previous? Did you scrap that and then go to Berkshire? What?
Fred Barron, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll do that. VHB was a no, we didn't pay anything for that. They volunteered. It was a study that they did that we asked for, and they did, and it was very much an aspirational kind of thing. They didn't do in-depth surveys on the ground. It was just sort of, here are some nice ideas for what you might do with this property.
All right.
And I think we've treated it as such, as not a plan or a set of plans, but okay, these are some things that we might theoretically do, and there were some issues with each of their three.
So you're not working with that.
So I mean, it's there. It can be used for reference, or looking at and say, hey, is this something we might do? But it is not anything that we're relying on in any way.
Okay, understood.
Right. The way I would think
Can I
about it,
ask
Melissa,
about that too?
is, go ahead, Montserrat.
That's a good question. I've never really been clear on this either. Why did they do it if we weren't paying for it?
Yeah.
What was the purpose?
It was, I think, in conjunction with something at a UMass.
So it's like a student project?
What?
Was it a student project?
I don't remember exactly what instigated it, but it was, I think it was, as I said, in relation with UMass, with some sort of project or study that they were doing, and this was, they tasked people to do this.
Okay.
But again, it was not anything that we specifically commissioned and paid for.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so I thought about it as it planted the seed that maybe something could be done there. And if the economic situation was different, it suggested, potentially a relatively small scale, 12 to 20 units or maybe 24 units could be built there. They sort of laid that as seemingly like a possibility.
Yeah.
And then they drew they gave us some diagrams, which you've seen.
Yeah, look fancy.
Yeah, but there again, the question of where was the septic system going to go? It just raised a lot. Then it raised more questions, and this committee ended up saying, we really need more in-depth analysis of the site to decide whether something really, as we've talked about today, of economically feasible scale from a developer point of view. There's no point in putting a lot more committee time and energy into this site if you just can't do a meaningfully large affordable housing project.
Right. And we need to know the physical parameters of a project. The economics may change over time. If the state really puts, a big amount of money into affordable housing in rural areas, what needed to be a 30-unit project can now be a 15-unit project if there's additional funding sources. So, but we need to know what is what's the max possible.
Well, from an appraisal standpoint, what you're looking for is highest and best use.
Right.
Which fits what's economical, what's fine, environmental.
Yeah, and it's just that the economics may change over time.
Right. So to give me a background on this, where did the seed get planted to study this piece of land? Was it something that you as a committee said, hey, we've got this piece of land? Did the town come to you?
We as a town, we've got this piece of land. We've had it for roughly 20 years, sitting there off the tax rolls, not being useful in any way except to the snowmobile club.
Did you say that the town sort of brought it up and said, let's look at this piece of land?
Fred has brought it up. This committee has brought it up. It's been looked at. At one point it was on the market. I know the town has gotten random calls about availability, but they've never led to anything.
Okay.
It's just a difficult piece of land because of the environmental issues.
Right.
The town has no sewer. It's not in a commercial area. It's just not an easy piece of land to
Right. I get that.
with.
So once you've got this design etched out and you've got something in hand to take to the town, does this go to the planning board? Does this go to town meeting? Where does this go from there?
So I'll take a shot at answering this. So we're trying to figure first doing the study to figure out whether anything reasonable could be built there. Obviously, we can't build it, right? A developer would need to be involved. And as you heard, any economically feasible scale project there would not be able to comply with current Whately zoning. So, and changing zoning for a parcel like that is like, that's going to take too much time and be too complex. So we would have to start trying to use the 40B system in the state, but now instead of it being a developer coming in as doing what you could think of as a hostile 40B, I'm going to do this and bypass all your local zoning, we would actually be initiating the project ourselves and finding a developer. I mean, there's still a lot of unresolved issues. Like if you could do something there, now we need to get a developer.
Right.
There's questions about
And-
lining up funding. I mean, there's a lot of.
And if I can, we'd probably be working with FERCog and state agencies to try to help us, since we don't have a planner on staff or anything else, to help us find the resources that might be able to help develop this.
And that was my next question. How is this funded? If this goes forward?
Yeah, this would have to be grants and CPA, but CPA will not be able to cover more than a tiny piece of this. And there might have to be other financing mechanisms as well.
And it would, we may have, work with a developer. The developer would have to, bear most of the cost, but get it back in terms of rentals down the road. So
somebody that's willing to take on.
Yeah, we're still on the ground floor of this, trying to figure out what is possible. And then next step is figure out, okay, this is possible. Can we get it done?
Okay, great. I just felt like I needed to see sort of the big picture so that I could follow along.
It's just baby steps, and one step at a time. We're a small town. We can't, as I said.
I didn't know how far along and who was behind it, and so this helps me sort of understand what we're doing. Thank you.
And we don't have vast, easily accessible financial resources to tap. Over the couple of years I've been on this committee, we've talked about some other properties in town, like this person owns this property and it's like run down, and we've like, could we buy this from you, or would you donate it to the town? But it's not like we have a bundle of money to just like buy up a piece of property and then develop something brand new there, right? And also not a lot of land is coming on the market. Like we've not been pursuing any committee strategy of let's keep our eyes out for new, parcels coming up for sale, because now we can just swoop in and buy them. We're interested in things along the 510 corridor because of access to public transportation along that. Like, I don't know that we're worried too much about, what's going on the center school up near Whately Center. It would be, I suppose, nice if some affordable housing could be there, but it's off the beaten path, So there was at some point.
Affordable housing is not part of the current thinking there.
Yeah.
The center school, is this like a school building that's no longer a school? I'm brand new to town, so I don't know.
It is the old elementary school built in 1910, which is now
an empty
has
building?
not been used as a school for 20
Do you know where the
years.
milk bottle is, Melissa?
I've been by it. Yes.
That's where the milk,
that building
behind the milk bottle.
Okay. And it's now just an empty building that
it's now just an empty building with a bad roof
before it rots to the ground.
Fred?
The other thing, for I guess Melissa's information, we have a private developer building housing in Whately at the called the Blue School, at the corner of Christian Lane and River Road. That was a school at one time. It's in the hands of a private developer, and he's secured his own funding, either state or federal funding. There's no town dollars in there, other than he pays taxes on the property every year, but he's developing that on his own, anywhere from, I guess, 10 units right now to maybe more.
Nice.
And the other property that actually the town owns is in the center of town, next to the town hall. It's called the Smike's House. There's the post office building next to the town hall. Then just to the left of the post office building, there is a two-story, 2-unit apartment complex or a house that the town owns that we contract through the, I think it's Franklin County Regional Housing Development Authority to manage that property for the town. They collect all the rents, they do the minor improvements and whatever. There was an agreement with the town that our select board signs every 10 years. That agreement is coming up for renewal next year, early next year in 27. So hopefully this committee will be involved in reviewing that agreement if we want to make changes. So that is a property that the town owns that is for community housing, I guess you could say.
That is the town's 2 units of
2
affordable
units,
housing.
yeah, that's a 2
Okay,
units.
so
but
the housing authority.
There's no financial benefit to the town, and I don't think there's ever been CPA money used on that. There may have been some in the past, but it's a potential, could be a potential use in the future, but.
Okay.
Yeah, so
All right,
that's
thank you. That helps.
Yeah,
Me to
yeah.
understand.
I know the situation. There's been a lot of discussion over the years in this committee, like what's doable, and I think we really rallied around this property at State Street because again, it's town owned. There's nothing there, but it's got all these constraints. There was this sort of suggestive free study, and so now we're just trying to see, okay, what could really be done there? And
How long have you been looking at this property?
Years.
I don't know, maybe really seriously, we've been talking about it for the last 6 months or so, maybe.
Well, but it's been thought about for a long time. It's just nothing.
But you kind
nothing's
of
been
honed in
done.
on it in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
It was being considered for the new highway department building.
At one point, and that was rejected
we waited
too.
until that discussion was over before we decided to consider it.
Got it. Okay.
The housing committee kind of has been involved in this since it started back in 2011. The housing committee started, and we were looking at that, doing some development at the property. Some private developers were contacted. Habitat for Humanity was contacted, came out, gave us feedback and all, and a few other people, and it never progressed after that. But it was, I guess, always on the back burner of the housing committee to try to do something, that property. So, but it's been on since I'd say 2011.
Wow.
So Fred's been on the housing committee longer than any of the rest of us.
Yeah, I've been on since the beginning back then. So
I was going to say, let's hope we all live long enough to see it.
Yeah.
come to be.
But this wonderful thing in Sunderland, if you've heard about it, I can't quite remember its name. It's like it's very large, 55 units, I think, or something like
In
that.
Sunderland?
I mean, I think the history behind that in Sunderland was like a 15-year, 12 or 15-year, or maybe even longer process.
Yeah,
So
no surprise.
we gotta, we all need to kind of settle in for the long haul. Like this is not something that gets an overnight success. We keep working and a little bit and we'll see. That's how it goes.
Yeah,
No,
we don't have a town support staff or a town fund of money to move it along
right
particularly fast.
Right.
The thing that may be useful is in the news you keep hearing South Deerfield is looking at redeveloping. There's a church in the center of town, and I think there's an RFP out for developers to develop that church building into affordable housing units, 10 or 20 units. And I think the RFP is out now, so it may be interesting to see what kind of response they get to that.
Yeah.
As far as number of units, the developers, it's somebody local, and who's financing all that. That's still being debated in South Deerfield. So that may be useful information for this committee later on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope that was helpful.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Yeah. No, Great. Glad we had that little conversation. Okay, so it's 7:09 p.m. We could, if somebody would make a motion to adjourn, we could adjourn. We have a date for our next meeting already, so anyone want to make a
I move
motion?
that we adjourn.
Montserrat has moved because Montserrat wants to get the heck out of here.
I'll second it.
Okay, all right, motion's made and seconded. We'll do a roll call vote. Montserrat,
Aye.
Fred Orlowski,
Aye.
Melissa,
Aye.
and I am aye. So it's 7:10 p.m. We are adjourned until our next meeting in June. Thank you all very much.
Thank
Thanks for all
you.
you do.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Good night.
Thank you.
All right, bye now.